بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. After praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and sending immense greetings and salutations upon the final Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam, we find that to fail to plan is to plan to fail. That is a famous cliche from amongst the non-Muslims that we find, and possibly even sums up us Muslims today as well. That for many of us there is no vision, there is no strategical approach in what we want to gain or what we want to achieve in our lives. Everything is just carried out in a haphazard manner that we just see every day as it comes and as it goes. And some may take offense to beginning our lecture with this statement that to fail to plan is to plan to fail is a statement of the non-Muslims. And here we should understand that those statements of non-Muslims, on many occasions they return back to Muslims, because we know al-hikmah dalatul mu'min, wisdom is the lost property of the believer. And whenever the believer finds that wisdom, has the most right to reclaim that lost property. Some people try to make this a hadith, but ulama of hadith have made a strong critique and question the authenticity. But the meaning is true, the meaning is accurate. It goes back to numerous members of the Salaf that we find. Wisdom is the lost property of the believer. What the Sharia prohibits us from, because we find there's many extreme elements in our Muslim society, that anything that comes from non-Muslims is to be rejected. If it's something of urf, of custom, of culture, of general behavior, and does not go against the Sharia, فَلَا مَانِعْ وَلَا حَرَجْ. There's no harm and no prevention in following those etiquettes or those statements, whatever they may be. There's no harm in that. The harm or the forbiddance that we find inside the hadith and sunan of Abi Dawood, مَنْ تَشَبَّهَ بِقَوْمٍ فَهُوَ مِنْهُمْ. Whoever begins to imitate a people, eventually becomes like them. In terms of aqa'id, in terms of belief, in terms of akhlaq, characteristics, wasulukiyat, certain etiquettes of behavior which are specific to them. If we begin to imitate them in those practices, then that is the nahi, that is the forbiddance. Other than that, anything which is khair, anything which is good, as we mentioned in general, returns back to al-Islam. Sometimes we may have forgotten about it, or may become something prominent amongst non-Muslims. And that is why I began today's reminder for myself and to the rest of you brothers and sisters to begin to think of the greater goal, the greater vision. It's not haram to plan and to have a vision. That's what some Muslims they think, that to have stages in what we want to gain or achieve in our life, and likewise specifically in this month of Ramadan. Yes, it's obviously true. وَعِنْدَهُ عِلْمُ السَّاعَةِ. To Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala belongs the knowledge of the hour, and knows which land we will die in, knows what we will inherit, what wealth we will possess. Belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But that does not prevent the believer from planning their life and what they want to do. So we find that before even Ramadan enters, we will be ill-prepared, through Ramadan possibly ill-prepared, towards the end of Ramadan, and years go by. Years go by, we still seem to be ill-prepared for this great blessed month. So firstly, we want to look at the preparation by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Obviously, there's no comparison between what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prepares. وَلِلَّهِ الْمَثَلُ الْأَعْلَى. To Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala belongs the greatest example. لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. Nothing is like unto Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is the all-hearing, the all-seeing. But just to help us to understand is in what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prepares for us human beings in general and specifically in the month of Ramadan, and then what do we in return give back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to show our gratitude, our belief and our conviction towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The first thing that we find is, as we began with the disbelievers, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned the preparation for these disbelievers, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah, فَاتَّقُوا النَّارَ الَّتِي وَقُودُهَا النَّاسُ وَالْحِجَارَةُ وَعِدَّتْ لِلْكَافِرِينَ. Fear that fire whose fuel is men and stones, or عِدَّتْ لِلْكَافِرِينَ. That's what we're trying to focus upon tonight, inshallah. Preparation. That fire whose fuel is men and stones has been prepared for the disbelievers. Another passage in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned, إِنَّ اللَّهَ أَعَدَّ لِلْكَافِرِينَ عَذَابًا مُهِينًا. Indeed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prepared a most humiliating torment, punishment for the disbelieving individuals. Likewise, inside Surah Al-Imran, we find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mention, وَاتَّقُوا النَّارَ الَّتِي أُعِدَّتْ لِلْكَافِرِينَ. Fear that fire which has been prepared for the disbelieving individuals. And then from there, a few verses later, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins to mention the path of the believers and the preparation for the believers. وَسَارِعُوا إِلَى مَغْفِرَةٍ مِّن رَبِّكُمْ وَجَنَّةٍ أَرْضُهَا السَّمَاوَاتُ وَالْأَرْضُ أُعِدَّتْ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. Race with one another in gaining that garden, that paradise, whose width is like the heavens and the earth. أُعِدَّتْ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. Which has been prepared now for whom? For the pious individuals. And then the characteristics are mentioned of the pious individuals. الَّذِينَ يُنْفِقُونَ فِي السَّرَّاءِ وَالضَّرَّاءِ. Those who spend in the times of adversity, of hardships, and times of ease. وَالْكَاظِمِينَ الْغَيْظِ. Those who literally swallow their anger. وَالْعَافِينَ عَنِ النَّاسِ. Those who pardon mankind. وَاللَّهُ يُحِبُّ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. These are the characteristics of the muttaqun. Because some of us, we think that we're pious. Some of us just conclude in the way that we dress or certain things that we may say, concludes that we're pious. La. Not to diminish the symbols of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but the inner core element of taqwa that we find. These are the descriptive natures of the muttaqun, the pious individuals. Those who spend of their wealth in times of not just ease, of adversity, difficulties. And that's the Quran, it mentions, لَن تَنَالُوا الْبِرَّ حَتَّى تُنْفِقُوا مِمَّا تُحِبُّونَ. You will never attain piety until you don't spend of the things that you love. I read the tafsir of Ibn Kathir regarding this ayah. If I'm not mistaken, talking about the companion Abu Talha radiyallahu ta'ala anhu that we find, or Talha, if I'm not mistaken, Talha ibn Ubaidillah, whereby you find he had this beautiful garden that even the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam would go there and drink from the fountain, drink from the well, and eat from the fruits. But he gave this garden away for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's a path of the muttaqun. Then we find bearing the comments of people, what people may say. وَالْكَاظِمِينَ الْغَيْظِ. Muttaqun, pious individuals, are those who literally swallow their anger. They only get angry for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's people who say different things, who make different accusations, whatever it may be. But the pious individuals swallow their anger. Then on top of that, وَالْعَافِينَ عَنِ النَّاسِ. They pardon mankind. They forgive people. That is an attribute of the muttaqun. وَاللَّهُ يُحِبُّ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves the doers of good. Likewise, if I find another passage of the Quran, that this has been prepared. الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا بِاللَّهِ وَرُسُلِهِ. This garden has been prepared for the pious individuals who believe in Allah and His Messenger. Likewise, in Hadith Qudsi that we find, أعددت لعبادي الصالحين ما لا عين رأت ولا أذن سمعت ولا خطر على قلب بشر. I prepared for my servants what no eye has seen, what no ear has heard, and the feeling or the perception has not come on the mind or the heart of any human being. And then the Messenger recited the verse, فَلَا تَعْلَمُ نَفْسٌ مَا أُخْفِيَ لَهُم مِّن قُرَّةِ أَعْيُنٍ جَزَاءً بِمَا كَانُوا يَعْمَلُونَ. No soul knows the coolness of the eyes of that which has been created for those individuals. For what reason? جَزَاءً بِمَا كَانُوا يَعْمَلُونَ, recompense, reward for their actions they used to do upon this earth. That is the creed of Ahl Sunnah. Life isn't just about making claims. Life of a believer is making the belief and to carry out that belief via the actions. That's what Aqidah in a nutshell of Ahl Sunnah is. There are many technical discussions or technical dissections that we find. A person needs to study in their life of Aqidah. But some of us, just being an average Muslim, it becomes something difficult. The theological debate that begins to take place. But if you can just understand this element inside your life, and inshallah you'll be successful throughout your life. Al-Iman yazidu bil-ta'ati wa yanqus bil-ma'asiyati. Iman goes up via obedience towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it plummets, it goes down via disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you understand this, then your life will be a successful life of devotion towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If we cannot understand the theological rhetoric that begins to take place, or discussions that begin to take place, it's not for every single individual to have that ability to understand the arguments of those rationalistic approaches and those approaches that go against Ahl Sunnah. It's not for everyone, because some people think every single Muslim يخصص في هذه الأشياء. Every single Muslim needs to be a specialist. It's not possible, because some of these claims or some of these beliefs, they go way beyond the mind of an average individual. So what we can understand from Aqidah, from belief, is to have that simple belief, which is a powerful belief. It's very simple, but if you hold that belief, it's very powerful. وَهُوَ مَعَكُمْ أَيْنَمَا كُنْتُمْ وَاللَّهُ بِمَا تَعْمَلُونَ بَصِيرٌ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching over you wherever you are. He is the all-seeing, the all-hearing. That's Aqidah, that's belief. You have that, that's it, you're successful throughout your life. You understand that inside your life, live by that you are wary that wherever you are, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching over us and knows our actions, knows our inner thoughts, knows what our eyes are concealing or what our hearts are concealing. So this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prepared for us believers. And then we find an even more specific preparation in the month of Ramadan. So imagine, that's just general what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prepared for the muttaqoon inside paradise. And even more so inside paradise, what is the preparation inside Ramadan that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes? The preparation that we find on the first day of Ramadan, the first night of Ramadan, what happens in the hadith of Bukhari and Muslim? All of the doors of paradise are flung open. All of them are swung open. And all of the doors of Jahannam are what? Are sealed. And all of the devils are chained up. Here you find ulama of hadith begin to make a discussion, how come there still happens to be some evil in our society? So different interpretations be given. Some of them say that also shayateen, the leaders of the devils, don't want to name them today in public, they are chained up. But the other small shayateen still exist. Or we find devils amongst whom, as the Quran mentions, devils from amongst mankind. So the jinn may be tied up, but there's still going to be devils around us. There's people around us who are devils. They still exist. Other ulama mention that the evil within the individual, it comes out even in Ramadan. That those people still have that evil corruption inside themselves, and they're not able to withhold themselves, restrain themselves. It comes out. And thus the Quran mentions, إِنَّ النَّفْسَ لَأَمَّارَةٌ بِالسُّوءِ إِلَّا مَا رَحِمَ رَبِّي. The soul, it yearns towards evil. If it's placed inside that environment, which is conducive towards evil, it will come out and go towards that evil. إِلَّا مَا رَحِمَ رَبِّي. Except for the soul, which has the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon it. And the evidence from this ayah is crystal clear. Because we look at the siyaq, you look at the context of this ayah, is inside Surah Yusuf. Talking about who? Yusuf alayhi salam being tempted by the woman. Being all alone with his strange woman, with his beautiful woman, all on his own, and everything was created that he could have fallen into that temptation. And the soul is yearning towards that temptation. But he obviously had that inner faith, that conviction, that consciousness towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, taqwa, the recognition of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inside his heart. And that's exactly inside Surah Yusuf that we find the Quran mentions, إِنَّهُ مَن يَتَّقِي وَيَصْبِرْ فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُضِيعُ أَجْرَ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. إِنَّهُ مَن يَتَّقِي. Whoever has taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَيَصْبِرْ, and is patient, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will never ever let the actions, the reward of the people who are patient ever go to waste. Those are the fawaid. This month of Ramadan, there's so many fawaid of Ramadan, but the essence, وَعَلَى رَأْسِهِمْ is taqwa Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As we're going to hear throughout Ramadan, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. Fasting has been prescribed for you, O you who believe, just like it was prescribed for those people before you, that you may attain what? Taqwa. Taqwa Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Consciousness towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is the best provision all of us should carry inside our hearts. That's why inside the ayat talk about Al-Hajj, inside Surah Al-Baqarah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, وَتَزَوَّدُوا. Take your zad, take your provision, your passport, your visa, your food, your drink, your paperwork. Take the things of the dunya. وَتَزَوَّدُوا فَإِنَّ خَيْرَ الزَّادِ التَّقْوَى وَاتَّقُونِ يَا أُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. But the best provision that you take, O men of understanding, is taqwa. Right here inside your heart, the consciousness towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is the month of taqwa, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is creating the avenue, the opportunity, the preparation for us to enter into paradise. Another hadith in Sunan of Imam Tirmidhi, likewise, if I'm not mistaken, Sunan of Ibn Majah, that we find, on the first night of Ramadan, a caller calls out, Ya baghi al-khair aqbil. O seeker of goodness, come and claim that goodness. O seeker of evil, aqsir. Restrain yourself, withhold yourself. And every single night, a person's neck is delivered or saved from the fire, and that is every single night of Ramadan, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala delivers and rescues people from the punishment of the hellfire. This is such an immense preparation by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for us individuals inside this month of Ramadan, to such a degree that we find that the reward in the Hadith Qudsi is multiplied. All of the actions of the human being, the son of Adam, are rewarded appropriately, except for fasting. It is for me, and I will recompense the individual. Now this hadith, obviously as Muslims, we all know that all of our actions are dedicated towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. قُلْ إِنَّ الصَّلَاةِ وَنُسُكِي وَمَحْيَايَ وَمَمَاتِي لِلَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ لَا شَرِيكَ لَهُ وَبِذَلِكَ أُمِرْتُ وَأَنَا أَوَّلُ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. Say indeed, my praying, my sacrifice, my living, my dying is all dedicated towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I associate no partners with Him subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I am amongst the first and foremost individuals to submit. So we all know that. So why in this hadith Qudsi is it saying that fasting is for me and I will recompense the individual? Ulama of hadith have mentioned that every other action that we do in our life or in our lives is visualized by people. We pray, it's visualized. We perform Hajj, it's visualized. Perform Umrah, it's visualized. Even the giving of charity, somehow, apparently, it may come out. People get to know, you've done this well, if you've done this action. As for fasting, then may Allah forbid, one of us can secretly go and do what? We can go and eat some food. And say what? I'm still fasting. But why doesn't a person do that? Why doesn't a Muslim do that? Because now, inside, deep down inside their heart, they are visualizing and thinking that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching over me. So that level of taqwa multiplies the reward to 10 times, to 700 times, to as many times as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants. That's the meaning of this hadith. All the rest of actions are rewarded appropriately by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But fasting goes to a different dimension. Because a person can eat and drink and pretend they are still fasting. But because of the fear and the conscience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a person refrains, so thus Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala magnifies the reward. Hatta we find, وَالَّذِي بِيَدِهِ بِنَفْسِي, or the one in whose hand is my soul, لَخَلُوفُ الصَّائِمْ أَطْيَبُ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ مِنْ رِيحِ الْمِسْكِ. Imagine this preparation. You know the natural odor that comes out of our mouth whilst we're fasting is natural. The stomach is empty. The doctors have talked about, and thus you find that this repulsive smell begins to take place, come out of the mouth of the individual. Some of us, we may hide from non-Muslims or just try to pretend this, that and the other. You know that smell, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has transformed that smell. Look at the preparation of even that smell. That smell that khuluf, which comes out the mouth, the odor that comes out the mouth of the fasting individual is more beautiful than the smell of musk in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is all trying to understand the concept of what? Preparation. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prepared and made for us. Now, us in return, what is our preparation? That's what we want to come to. What do we now do in return? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't need any of our preparation, what we do. But just as we began with, to help us to understand. قُلْ إِن كُنْتُمْ تُحِبُّونَ اللَّهِ, you claim to love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, فَاتَّبِعُونِ, follow the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And raddul fail, what will happen? يُحْبِبْكُمُ اللَّهِ وَيَغْفِرْ لَكُمْ ذُنُوبَكُمْ وَاللَّهُ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will love you. So if you want to gain the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then there is naturally a relationship. As the Quran mentions, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا إِن تَنْصُرُوا اللَّهَ يَنْصُرْكُمْ وَيُثَبِّتْ أَقْدَامَكُمْ. It's a two-way relationship. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has laid the causes and the effects. Oh, you believe, if you help Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will help you and make firm your feet. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not need our help. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created that we have to do certain actions to gain the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whatever we do is irrelevant at times. Because even the Quran mentions, وَمَا رَمَيْتَ إِذْ رَمَيْتَ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ رَمَى. It wasn't you that threw on that day, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It was us that threw. That dust that went into the eyes of the enemies. Your task is just to throw, finish. And our task is to convey it to a different dimension. So you help Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah will help you and make firm your feet. So we find inside the Quran mentions in terms of preparation, one of the most strongest ayat, وَأَعِدُّ لَهُمْ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُم مِّن قُوَّةٍ. Inside Surah Al-Anfal, if I'm not mistaken, prepare for them all steeds of warfare. Scare your enemy and scare our enemy. The enemy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You might be thinking, what's the concept of this ayah, talking about jihad, talking about preparation, to do with the Muslim life and the Muslim ummah at the moment. A Muslim nation which is ill-prepared for warfare is ill-prepared for anything else that will come in front of its life. Here we're not calling towards warfare. Every country has a concept of discipline. Many non-Muslim countries, it is part of being resident of that country to serve in their armed forces. Not for warfare, for discipline. That's what we Muslims lack. We have no discipline. And a nation which is ill-prepared for warfare will be ill-prepared for anything that it faces in its life. That's what we Muslims have become. We are ill-prepared. No one's saying that we need to go out and proclaim war, whatever it may be. Every country has its defense, don't they? Every country has its army, has everything there that exists. So what about us as Muslims? We don't have anything because we're ill-prepared. So everything in our lives is ill-prepared. Everything which is linked to our lives is ill-prepared. Even the sighting of the moon or the crescent that we find differences begin to take place. And Fuqaha have mentioned that you fast with the majority, even if the majority happens to be wrong, which is impossible. But let's say for argument's sake, the majority is wrong. What does the Sharia say? The Sharia says you still fast with them. You still fast with them. That's what the Sharia says. It doesn't say divert yourself away, because here the congregation of the Ummah takes precedence over a personal interest, what may concern an individual. But many of us are in different directions. And thus we find that in the hadith, in Sunnah Imam Tirmidhi, the visualizing of the crescent bring upon us a month of al-yuman, or bil-aman, of peace, of devotion, of commitment. This is a month of rushd. And indeed the crescent, Rabbi wa Rabbuka Allah. My Lord and your Lord is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's how the Muslim is trying to enter into this month of Ramadan. Is asking for the blessings of this month. To enter into this month in a state of devotion, a state of commitment. We enter the month of Ramadan in a state of ikhtilafat, of differences, and within the month and outside the month. And some of us average Muslims that we find that we couldn't care less. That's what we find. Inna sa'yakum lashatta. The Quran mentions that people are at various degrees. various degrees in the understanding of the month of Ramadan and the intent of the month of Ramadan. There are some Muslims who meet the month of Ramadan that we find, or before that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us this opportunity to use this month of Ramadan. We find in a hadith, as-salatu ila as-salah, wal-jum'atu ila al-jum'ati, wa Ramadan ila Ramadan, kaffaratun lima baynahunna majtunibatil kaba'ir. One prayer to another prayer, one Jum'ah to another Jum'ah, one Ramadan to another Ramadan is an expiation of whatever takes place between the two, as long as a person stays away from the major sins. Ulama of hadith have mentioned, what is the interpretation of this hadith? One interpretation that we find is the athar, the effect of the prayer. Like now praying Maghrib, a person may go back to their family, go back to their work, or whatever it may be, and the iman will be different from offering the prayer at Maghrib. The adhan is given for Isha, so the power of that iman, of that one prayer, takes the person to where? To the following prayer. The admonition that we heard today on Yawm al-Jum'ah, the impact of that khutbah, that maw'idah, the admonition, doesn't last till you go out the doors. That shouldn't be the impact. Nor should that be the role of the khatib, the imam, and nor should that be the role of the people that attend. The power, by the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the magnitude of those words should carry the believer all the way till when? Till Yawmul Khamis, till Thursday. And you know what? Hey presto, in the morning, what is it? It's Jum'ah. So once again, the iman is lifted. And likewise, the 29 or 30 days of fasting of Ramadan don't just last until the 1st of Shawwal. We know it's a great shame. It is a very big shame upon us Muslims that we have our Muslim youth on the night of Eid, before the beginning of Eid that we find on that night, the 1st of Shawwal, straight after Maghrib, you find Muslims are organizing their alcohol, their drugs, where they're going to fornicate, where they're going to commit adultery, what cars they're going to use, what haram actions they're going to do. That is a reality. Correct me if I'm mistaken. Correct me. On the first day of Eid. This is what a large portion of Muslim youth will be doing. And you know, Fuqaha have mentioned that if a Muslim makes this intention inside their heart, as you brothers say, I will fix up my life for these 29 or 30 days. And at the same time make a double intention that as soon as Ramadan is over, I will go back to my normal lifestyle. There's a difference between this and all of us, an average Muslim, that we're going to sin even in Ramadan, may Allah forbid, outside Ramadan, make mistakes, do wrong things. But we never made that intention, never had that specific intention that I'm going to do this haram, or I'm only going to be good now, or try to have a barter relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that I'm only doing this now and you give me this at the end of Ramadan. Look how many people come to the Masjid and offering their prayers during exam period, weren't they? What happened after exams? But they're probably going to still carry on praying until what, 7th of August, 14th of August. Once results are there, finish. Out the window it all goes. Now we don't need Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because I got what I wanted. We have this type of barter relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's an evil relationship to have, or an evil understanding. So Fuqaha mentioned that if you made a double intention, I'll only be a good Muslim for these 29, 30 days, then I return back to my normal lifestyle. Islamic jurists have mentioned, فَصِيَامُكَ بَاطِلٌ. Your fasting has been invalidated without you even fasting. And if you did fast 29 or 30 days, you have been, excuse the expression, you've been wasting your time. So it's still a few days to go to Ramadan. If we know brothers, we know sisters, we know family members, or I know my own self, that's what my intention is, that I'm only going to be good for these 29, 30 days. And at the same time, I made that intention in my heart that I'm going to go back to my normal lifestyle. I'm going to go back to do what I was doing before. If I was seeing a girlfriend before, I'm going to go back to after Ramadan. If I was smoking drugs before, I'm going to go back to the after Ramadan. If I was clubbing, I was doing this, I was doing that, I'm going to go back to it afterwards. Or doing fraud, there's one person in that area, maybe some imam, runs a number of off-license businesses, he covers the off-license. In Ramadan, he sells no alcohol, no liquor. At least maybe some fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and his off-light is directly opposite my masjid, where I normally pray. So maybe some fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, give him the benefit of the doubt. He covers up the alcohol, says it's Ramadan, I'm not going to serve alcohol in Ramadan. وَهُوَ رَبُّكُمْ, not just in Ramadan. Allah is our Lord just in Ramadan. How about the rest of the months? Is it another Lord? Is it something else that we worship? You know, these games that we Muslims have become, we've become famous for games. That's what the reality is. You know, we talk about the Jews, isn't it? People get overzealous about the Jews, isn't it? قَاتَلَهُمُ اللَّهِ. We worry about them, don't we? But إِنَّ هَذَا الْقُرْآنِ يَقُصُّ أَكْثَرَ الَّذِي يَخْتَلِفُونَ وَيَقُصُّ عَلَى بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلِ. Most of this Qur'an narrates about whom? About Bani Israel. That's what most of this Qur'an narrates about. For what reason? As the hadith I began with, in Sunan Abi Dawood, that you begin to, whoever imitates the people becomes like them. The full word in the hadith is that you are going to imitate the people that came before you. Footstep by footstep. That if one of them was to go into a lizard's hole, you would do what? You would follow suit. So they asked the messenger, are you talking about al-Yahud wa Nasara? Who? Are you talking about the Jews and the Christians? قَالَ فَمَنْ. Who else am I referring to? In other narrations, you will follow who? Ar-Rum wa Faris, the Romans and the Persians. In today's language, you will follow Hollywood or Bollywood. That is it. That is what Muslims are full of. But obviously now you've got Nollywood and other woods as well, isn't it? Astaghfirullah. And thus you find in Ramadan, it's not an exaggeration, the watching of musalsalat, the watching of dramas and TVs and programs, it goes up in the Muslim world. It doesn't go down. All of us as an average Muslim, we should know, stay away from the television. Cut down on television, cut down on this. But what happens? It goes up. And people are watching these serials. And what are these serials? What are they preaching to the people? Corruption, illicit relationships with one's neighbors, one's sister-in-law, one's brother-in-law, one's aunt, one's uncle. This is what these dramas in these series, that's what they're teaching people. And then we complain, oh, we have corruption. This is the reason why you have corruption. Because this is the reality. So the effects of Ramadan, that change we make for those 29, 30 days should carry on all the way until when? Till now, Sha'ban. And that's when all of us get used to eating, drinking, normal life. The body is tuned once again. What happens? It's Ramadan. So we're spiritually lifted once again. And that's the Salaf used to pray, Allahumma ballighna Ramadan. Oh our Lord, get us to Ramadan. And when Ramadan is over, Allah accept it from us. That's how the Muslim should be. That this is the opportunity to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala once again. And thus, as we mentioned, there's some people who meet the month of Ramadan bid-dajar. They are angry. They are upset. That's a reality. Some Muslims, they're angry. You know what? I can't eat in public anymore. If I walk down here, people see me, they recognize me. I can't go into the pub. I can't do this. I can't do that. Yes, it sounds silly, but you travel some places, you'll see it. Some people do wear the salwar kameez and walk into the pub. They don't care anymore. In our area, you find some people after Yawmul Jum'ah, what do they go and do? Straight to the bookies. With your topi on. And your salwar kameez. At least go and get changed. Straight after Jum'ah. Straight after Jum'ah, straight into the bookies. No shame. If you have no shame, do whatever you want to do. So there's Muslims who are going to meet the month of Ramadan with disgust. They're going to be angry that I can't do what I normally used to do in my life. Because now I could get rebuked severely. There's some Muslims who meet the month of Ramadan bis-safar. We all know that if you're traveling, you don't need to fast. If you want to fast whilst you're traveling, you can. If you don't want to fast, you don't have to fast. None of the companions will blame one another. A group were fasting, a group were not fasting. They never rebuked one another. You're free. But you have to make up those days once again. But you know, some of us Muslims, we're intelligent, aren't we? So we say, you know, it's Ramadan, Sheikh. So I'm traveling. I don't need to fast. You had the rest of the year to travel, to go on holiday, to go wherever, Costa del Sol or wherever you wanted to go, astaghfirullah. But now in Ramadan, you decide to travel. With what intention? It's all about the intention. That inside your heart, you're trying to avoid Ramadan, then that is what counts. So you could play games with us, they come and ask us many questions. Sheikh, I'm traveling, do I have to fast? I'm going here, I'm going there, this, that and the other. So we have to give them any rulings. Yet we don't need to fast, you make it up at a later stage. But if your intent is that you're trying to avoid Ramadan, then that is what you will be judged upon. And in some of us Muslims, we meet the month of Ramadan, already now what's being prepared? How many samosa? How many? 150? 200 samosa? Keema samosa, chicken samosa, pasties. Isn't it? Meet the month of Ramadan with food and drink. One small item is out of the freezer, all hell breaks out loose in the house. One samosa gone missing. Order 10 more boxes. Can't be possible. So some of us, that's all our dimensions are worried about in Ramadan, to make sure. You know, Ramadan, you're supposed to lose weight. We Muslims, what happens in Ramadan? MashaAllah, tabarakallah. Especially our sheikhs, isn't it? We're getting fatter and fatter, aren't we? We start gaining weight. That's why in Taraweeh, what we find? Burping, isn't it? He said, mashallah, biryani, lamb biryani. That's why as a side point, you know, the Imam, very rarely do they eat. They eat always when? Till after Taraweeh. So whilst we're burping away, everything's coming out, we can't go down to ruku, we can't do sujood, rolling around. Young boys, you see young boys, 22, 20 years old, sitting on a chair. Why are you sitting on a chair for? Astaghfirullah. Because that's all we're worried about. Is that how we should be meeting the month of Ramadan? That's why in the hadith in Bukhari, obesity will become rampant in this ummah. Minor signs of the Day of Judgment is obesity. That exists today. Building towards that scale. So the real intent of Ramadan, many of us are beginning to lose that intent. Lose that purpose of Ramadan. And likewise we find that Ramadan is fasting, that we should all go back and study the basic elementary fiqh of fasting, the do's and the don'ts concerns us, and likewise the other elements of fasting. These other elements, they don't break our fast, but they do diminish the reward. Fuqaha mentioned Sawmul Ayn, Sawmul Udhun, Sawmul Lisan, Sawmul Yad, or Sawmul Rijl. So it's not just fasting of the butt and fasting of the stomach, it's fasting of the eyes, fasting of the tongue, fasting of the ears, fasting of the hands and fasting of the legs. What does that mean, fasting? How do we stay away from food? You only look at that which is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Only visualize that which is pleasing. You remember we began with simple Muslims. Well, Sheikh, I'm only watching the news. If it's a woman who's not dressed appropriately, I don't care whether it's IMAX or plasma or HD or 55-inch screen, whatever it is. It's what? A woman who is non-mahram. وَقُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ يَخُضُّ مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ. Say to the believing men to lower their gazes. No need to go into a technical dimension. Simple. So the eyes shouldn't be looking at something which is haram. Simple. If you want to have that, excel in your fast and gain that taqwa, that's what a person tries to do. Sawmul udhun, fasting of the ears. So many young individuals, what do? All day long lying there listening to what? Music. Sheikh, I'm passing my time. Listening to Puff Daddy. All day long, listening to music. So that's fasting. You've broken your fast in a sense. You haven't actually physically broken your fast, but diminishing the reward. وَصَوْمُ اللِّسَانِ. Fasting of the tongues. How many times you come into the masjid? What do you hear? You hear more backbiting in Ramadan, sometimes than outside of Ramadan. Where's the food? Why hasn't he come? Why hasn't Imam come? Why isn't that there? Why hasn't he put this out there? Why hasn't he done that? That's backbiting. That is backbiting. Making dhikr of your brother what he dislikes. That's backbiting. In the month of Ramadan, we're just sitting in the corners, qila wa qal, he said this, he said that, he's like this, he's like that. The masjid should be what? When you walk into the masjid, it should be what? The buzzing of the Quran. It should be buzzing of the Quran. You walk into the masjid Ramadan, that's all you should see people doing. That's why Imam Malik gave up all forms of teaching and would only focus upon what? The Quran. That's what we should be doing. Focusing on the Quran. If you can't read too well, go back, try practice reading, find a buddy friend, to say, listen to me, read, correct me, read the English, read another language, read something of the Quran. It's the month of the Quran. شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن. This is the month that we sent down the Quran. How many of us Muslims today have read the Quran cover to cover? Isn't it? But how many of us Muslims know everything? What's top of the charts? Who's top of the Premier League? Who got transferred from here to... Even I know that. And I'm not even into it. I even end up learning that knowledge. And that's just by passing through. And so look how many Muslims, they specialize in these factors. And I'm getting a stage in my life, I know sometimes I have to know what the fixtures of matches are. Because I'm not joking. Wallahi, sometimes go to lectures and people are not there because you know why? Because probably Man U are playing somebody or something. It's a Champions League. So I've got, if you could look at my diary now, I've got all key dates penciled into my diary. So maybe I can get time to watch those matches as well. Astaghfirullah. So I know that why these people will not turn up to a lecture. People won't bother to come. That once again, as we began with, it shows our priorities. Where our priorities lie as Muslims. After 10, 15 years, we still find that some of us can't read the Quran. Some of us haven't read the Quran from cover to cover. We don't know what the Quran is telling us. That's why in Taraweeh, that's why some of us are standing there, some of us start dozing off, going to sleep. We start falling asleep. Or the Imam recites slightly slowly, then we just come and start complaining. Top gear, isn't it? Fifth gear. Tell the Imam to speed up. What do you mean tell the Imam to speed up? You can come to the Imam now and say, look Shaykh, we have work in the morning, in Salatul Isha, read any moderate surahs. You can tell the Imam. Do you know that? For Fard prayer. But for Nafil prayer, you don't have to, you cannot criticize the Imam. Because it's supposed to be supererogatory prayer, and he can lengthen it as long as he wants. If you don't want to pray, you just quietly walk away. You'll still be rewarded. And that's why in our culture we find that if you don't pray Taraweeh, you can't do what in the morning? You can't fast. And none of the fuqaha have said that. There's no relationship between Taraweeh and fasting the month of Ramadan. Ramadan is obligatory and Taraweeh is highly recommended. Don't get me wrong, if you don't have a good excuse, you should not miss it. You should not miss it at all. But if you're traveling or you're doing something at work, then there's no harm in doing that. So with that in mind, and likewise, as I mentioned, the fasting of the mouth, we should be vigilant of what we're saying and what we're listening to. Fasting the hands, not to touch anything at haram, and likewise, fasting by legs, not to walk towards places of evil. Some people, even in the month of Ramadan, they know where people are sitting doing haram or not focusing. We go and sit in those places. So if we want to have a blessed Ramadan, we all need to go back, revitalize ourselves, study our own selves. What can I do this month of Ramadan to benefit the maximum? Where are my shortcomings? Where have I fallen short? That's all of us. All of us can go back and say, look, this isn't right about me. My characteristics, my behavior, my devotion towards the Quran, my prayer, my du'as, my supplications, my lifestyle, everything, whatever it may be. All of us can go back and question ourselves. Because maybe these are ayyam ma'dudat. These are the final days of our life. Restricted days of Ramadan. None of us know if we're going to make this Ramadan or the following Ramadan. Thus we find in this month of Ramadan, the key element inside the whole fiqh of Ramadan we find is to make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In the fiqh of Ramadan, in ayat 181 onwards that we find, the most powerful ayat we mentioned many times, alhamdulillah, وَإِذَا سَأْلَكَ عِبَادِ عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ. Servant asks about me, then I'm close by. This is all in the siyaq, in the middle of ayat, before talking about Ramadan and after Ramadan. That this month is month of dua. And inshallah, on Yawm al-Jum'ah, when we come, inshallah, if Allah blesses us, we're going to be talking about Ramadan is waqtu tabdeel. Ramadan will be khutbah inside this masjid, inshallah, if I'm still alive, to talk about Ramadan is a time for change. Barakallahu feekum, subhanakum wa bihamdik, shirad la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.
Jazakallah khair, Ustadh. I'd like to take the opportunity to ask, get you guys to ask some questions, really. So I've cut the talk a little bit short by a few minutes before we go into Isha. It's an opportunity to the floor to ask a question, a general question. Tafaddal. Sorry.
My question is not actually about Ramadan, but you mentioned about drama scenes and stuff like that. And you mentioned what happened with drama scenes. What do you think about like dramas or films which are like trying to give it Islamic message, like the message which was trying to give Islamic.
The brother asked the question that sometimes some programs or some documentaries or like the message that we find, etc. Is there any harm in watching this? Wallahu alam. If it's just a Muslim, a new Muslim, and something being exposed to Islam, maybe it might be possible. Those of us, I'm sure that we're slightly more advanced than that. We don't need to watch these programs or these series, these dramas. Like I said, try to go back and learning the Quran, memorizing the Quran, reciting the Quran, reading tafsir, reading hadith. There's many. When we was growing up, there was hardly any books in English. Now you find, mashallah, numerous books are available. People should take them, try to go perform Umrah in Ramadan, try to come in a state of itikaf inside the masjid, try to really stay away from, like I said, the television, the video, and the satellite, everything that exists around us, these distractions, and focus upon the good things and the beneficial and the best things is the Quran. Wallahu a'lam.
Jazakallah khair. Another question, something more specific with Ramadan. Something a friend even may be suffering difficulty from, and you might want to guide somebody. So you might want to know something more about that. Okay. Assalamu alaikum.
If you find a person in this blessed month of Ramadan indulging in drinking alcohol or committing adultery,
Who's a Muslim or?
Muslim, non-Muslim, are these people still in the fold of Islam?
Brother Sheikh asked a question that if a person in the month of Ramadan and he drinks alcohol or commits adultery, are they still in the fold of Islam? Overall, we find that every action of kufr it does not make a person a disbeliever. So that should be crystal clear. So we rebuke a person that they're doing an action of kufr or they're doing a haram action. That does not necessitate that now they are disbeliever. So as an average individual, ما نكفر أحد. We should not claim that a person is a disbeliever. So even the person may be doing evil in his month of Ramadan, we should pray for them and give them advice. I've met people and he would be in a state of drunkenness. In his month of Ramadan, they seen me, they felt ashamed of what they're doing, spoke with them, fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They say it's a weakness, brother. I've been drinking all my life, I'm addicted to it. They're weeping, they're crying. What more can I say to them? Can I now say to them, you're a disbeliever on top of that? So all we can do is advise these people to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, maybe invite them to the masjid, invite them to a lecture, invite them to a khutbah, invite them somewhere, and make dua. Make dua sincerely to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala there. May Allah forbid there are family members or close friends that we know that in this month of Ramadan to expand their heart, open up their heart and make them to recognize what they're doing is haram. And inshallah, you may be a cause by the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for this person to stay away from that evil action and try to stay away from classifying people as any disbelievers. Wallahu a'lam.
Question?
The brother asked the question, what advice can you give to somebody who's going to fast and doesn't pray? And in general we find that that person's fasting once again is batil, is false. They're wasting their time. But obviously we don't want to give that message out because obviously we know we have many cultural Muslims, at least I'm fasting, or at least I come Jum'ah today I came, or at least I wear a topi when I come masjid, or at least I wear a hijab, etc. These are type of Muslims we have to deal with. It's not about at least this, or at least that. That's why sometimes some masjids I'm banned from, because obviously that's harsh approach. Some people don't want to hear that. But that is a reality. Time has come to stop being soft with our people. That is a reality. We've just been too soft too long. We just let everything go by. Oh, well, at least they're fasting. Well, alhamdulillah, it's a good sign, but they need to be told that fasting is a pillar that came after praying. So you need to develop your prayer. Just take it step by step if you want to, but in the month of Ramadan, as I mentioned, go back and think that if I'm not praying, that according to the scholars, your fasting is invalidated. We don't want to push that message, but go back and think about that deeply. Especially these long days, people are going to fast. That shows some element of jihad, struggling in their life, isn't it? So why not struggle with your prayers as well? Most people are up at Fajr time, aren't they? Eating their food. Most time, Maghrib as well. So now you probably come for Isha as well. You're only left with what? Dhuhr and Asr. And most of us are probably on school holidays or college holidays, whatever it may be, or taking time off work. So the opportunity is there. So we advise them, look, brother, you're coming for the rest of the prayers. Try your best to exert your effort. Pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you remain steadfast. And this is the first thing in the Mu'jam Tabrani, أَوَّلُ مَا يُحَاسَبُ عَلَى الْعَبْدِ الصَّلَاةِ. The first thing the servant will be asked about the day of judgment will be the prayer. If that is rectified, everything else will be easy. So this is a key message we need to begin to deliver to our Muslim community. We find too many elements of qaza. There's no qada in al-Islam. The making up of a prayer is only if a person has fallen unconscious or has been prevented in a serious manner or lost their senses or fallen into deep sleep and then they awaken. As for in our culture, what do we find? I'm at college, I'm at work, come home, read Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib and Isha in 7 minutes, and that's me done with. That's what some of the khutbah they teach, that there's qaza. What do you mean there's qaza? There is no qada in Islam, except for genuine excuses. But because we've come with that baggage of that cultural Islam, because we're living with non-Muslims, so Allah is Ghafurur Rahim. So I can pray later on. I can pray at the weekend. So some of us Muslims find it's going to secular dimension. It sounds very strange. Even amongst practicing Muslims, we become weekend warriors. We become weekend activists. But everything around us during the daytime is what? Is haram. But that's just my job. That's my profession. I have to intermingle with women, or I have to do this with women, or I have to do that, or I have to do that. I have to entertain that. Why? Why do you have to entertain that? We don't need this type of Islam. We need, as the Quran tells us, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أُدْخُلُوا فِي السِّلْمِ كَافَةً. Try your best. فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ. Obviously, we know this is an Islamic country, Islamic environment. We try our best to create that environment which is conducive to strengthen our iman, strengthen our faith, and likewise the prayer as well. Give the brother any sincere advice. Wallahu a'lam.
Jazakallah. Just another question. Some of us brothers work in environments which are difficult environments. So a question related keeping your fast as pure as possible, where some of the brothers are taxi drivers or work evenings or late shifts and get involved with going out into a position, I think you know where I'm coming from, where you expose yourself to these situations. So how can these brothers, if there's any advice to these brothers, to work towards freeing themselves of that difficulty whilst fasting in Ramadan?
Barakallahu fiqh. So we find here at the end of the day, every person is responsible for their own self. If a Muslim finds that doing a certain job or a task, it is detrimental to my faith, it exposes me to sins, if it leads me to fall into desires and temptations and its obstacles, then each one of us, inshallah, as a sensible individual, we can conclude what we need to do best in our life. Take steps to find some other form of work or to do something else and move away from that environment. That's a simple solution. We should all be hasibu anfusakum qabla an tuhasabu. Judge your own selves, bring yourself to accountability before you're brought forth to accountability. So any Muslim can look back and assess that this type of work, if it means I'm going out at night and I'm picking up these type of clientele, or they're involved in this type of work and they're doing this in my vehicle, or this may begin to take place, then a sensible individual will do what? That this is possibly not the best trade or the profession for me to do, to find other suitable hours and to do something else, and to create an avenue of moving away from that work and moving into a better form of work. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give the person the blessing and tawfiq to do that, inshallah. Wallahu a'lam.
Jazakallah khair, Ustadh. Just before we lead into Isha, just a few notices that during the month of Ramadan, inshallah, a sister has put forward to carry out some halakas for the sisters related to tafsir of the Quran for the next 30 days. So I'd advise that you pass, the brothers here who's listening, pass on the message to their sisters, mothers, wives and so on, and also the sisters who are listening, to inform their friends to take opportunity of this. It's been arranged, and it was arranged. There are some leaflets going around. The sister is named on here, and the sessions are taking place at 11:45 a.m. to Dhuhr namaz for 30 days. It's not easy to arrange something like this, and even for that sister to do this for 30 days, she inshallah has made intention to go through the tafsir of the Quran, each juz per day, for the next 30 days. So this is something that our mothers, our sisters, our wives should take great benefit of. So I would strongly encourage you pass this message on. Jazakumullah khair. Other notice that Ustadh Abdul Kareem has made intention for the next 30 days after Asr to do 20-minute reminders. So we should take opportunity of that. And finally, it's always something that we all know about, but the masjid has purchased land next door with great effort some time ago, and they're working hard to create funds to go into the development and to create something better for the community. A lot of Qarz-e Hasana was collected some time ago, in the order of about £200,000, and some of the people who offered the Qarz-e Hasana, the time is expiring and some of them require their funds back, all within their right. And the Masjid has set itself a target to try to raise, this is not fundraising by the way, so don't just run off now, I'm just reminding the brothers that you can go do your wudu. Okay, inshallah, leave behind a little check. Jazakallah khair. So the intention is to try to raise £70,000 during Ramadan. And the brothers have set up a little notice board at the back, and each week they will try to update that notice board at the back. So it's just a reminder, brothers, that please be generous with your donations during Ramadan and so on, but we're trying to raise these funds. Without further ado, Jazakallah khair, for the Muazzin to read the Adhan. Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum. Barakallah feek. Hayakum Allah.